And we're live. Hey out there, and welcome to today's Search Engine Journal webinar. Hope you're having a great day, and we're thrilled to have you here with us. I'm joined with Wayne Chahansky of iQuanti, and we're going to be talking about ways to demystify your SEO investments, what you can really expect from these investments as a leader in your organization. You should walk away from today's webinar knowing how to gauge which SEO strategies are worth your time and money, and how to steer your organization toward the right path of growth. So my name is Heather Campbell, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Wayne, thank you once again for being here with us.
Fantastic to be here. Thank you.
Awesome.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, so before we get into that general housekeeping, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and iQuanti?
Sure, absolutely. Aging myself a little bit. I've been in the industry for a very long time. It's been about 28 years. Kind of fell into the .com and the internet back in the day when it really picked up, and kind of came up the ropes in the developer track and doing UX, GUI, dev work. And then, of course, at that time, there was not really SEO. Google wasn't actually there yet. But when I was doing the development, there just wasn't um, a big draw to get traffic. So everybody said the websites didn't work. Long story short, I had to figure out how to get the traffic to the websites. And I was started to do what was now known as SEO back in the days when it was just Lycos and Ask Jeeves and Excite and AOL and all of the old big names. Google launched, and I kind of kept with the algorithm. Over my career, I've held many different positions, kind of if you're a military person, you can kind of look at it. I went through the enlisted ranks and then became an officer rather than jumping into the officer right at the beginning. And that means I kind of have gone through that groundwork, and I have ended up in top executive positions as a CIO, CMO. Right now, I'm currently vice president of search and site experience for iQuanti. iQuanti is a digital marketing performance agency that we specialize in search and conversion from an acquisition-focused standpoint. So I'm pleased to be here. Super excited to talk about this topic today with everyone.
Awesome. Well, let me be brief so that you can get to it. So first, for all of our attendees out there, if you experience any technical difficulties, please use the chat box to ask them or to let us know. There are separate tabs for the questions and the chat, so take a second to get familiar with those. It's in the upper top right of your screen. If you see a question that you like or that you were thinking about asking, you can give that a little thumbs up, and that'll upvote that and tell us that that's an important question that we should get to at the end when we do the Q&A. And so we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. There's also closed captioning, so if you need that, it's the little CC again up in that top right of your screen. And so we'll do our best to link to any resources or tools in the chat, but if we miss one, just ask. And then after the webinar, we ask if you've got a couple minutes, just stick around and take a short survey for us. It doesn't take any more than like 2 minutes, and it just helps us gauge what works for you and how we can make SEJ webinars more useful. And lastly, this is the question that we get asked the most. You will absolutely receive this full recording of this session later today, so watch your inbox for that. This is a live session. Make sure you get those questions in for Wayne as we're going through it. And with that, I'm out of here. Wayne, it's all yours.
Wonderful. Well, with that, what I wanted to do and talk about today is something a little bit different. It's not so much about tactics as it comes to SEO, but more about expectations. And expectations come with investment. And when you look at the investment, what kind of expectations or ROI can I expect from certain elements and different tactics that I am doing? So one, we're going to talk about investing into the SEO channel. Does the channel really work? I get that quite often. And most, even more common is, things are changing by itself. Even more common is asking, can we forecast the channel, right? So we're going to talk about that. And then the large topic is how to invest in content. What can I expect out of that content, as well as knowing what to write, when to write it, how to write it. And then from there, it goes into an authoritative standpoint, investing in the expectations of authority. How much do you actually need to invest into authority? And some of the do's and don'ts that we're going to talk about when it comes to authority management from a very white hat perspective. And lastly, the last topic is technical investments some key foundational elements as you go into that, and what elements actually are making the difference. As you can see, the three big topics are the three algorithmic pillars of SEO, and really what we want to talk about is level setting those expectations and the investments that kind of go behind that. Okay, so let's jump in. The first one of those questions that I have is about investing into SEO as a channel. It's very interesting. No matter what size your brand is, there is always an kind of lopsided, kind of this push-pull effect between paid and organic. And what's really interesting about this is it's not an either or statement; it's an and statement. And when I say that is, it should not be, well, I'm going to either do paid or I'm going to do organic. You really want to do both, and there's a reason from that, as it looks to maximize the overall what I call digital shelf space. But when we look at the investments, what's oddly off here is the overall impression share of a query is highly weighted towards the organic versus the overall from a paid. But yet the investment is quite the opposite. It's mostly investment in paid where people are not investing into SEO. So why is that? Why is it so lopsided? I mean, a lot of times we'll see budgets a 10-to-1 ratio between paid and organic, but yet the impression share is the complete opposite. People are looking. It looks like there might be some trouble with some audio. If there is, please put it in the chat. But so one of the things when we talk about the audio, or excuse me, about the paid and organic, when we look at the paid, a common CPA, and every brand, every industry is a little bit different, but it can average up to $300 to $400 as a standard CPA. If the organic channel is performing at maximum into the same area, we can see that the organic CPA is down to $25 to $65 a CPA. Now, as we know with paid, your cost per clicks are going to continue to evolve as the competition and the different bidding strategies come into play, and that investment is going to kind of continue to increase. So if your organization is not investing into SEO because of whatever reason, they don't know how to forecast it, they don't know how to do the attribution, they just don't know enough about it, you definitely want to make a business case, because you're missing out on a lot of impressions and a lower overall blended CPA as you kind of look through this. So when we look at how to use these two channels together, there's a lot of synergies that can come through this. As I mentioned, the digital shelf space. We have data that suggests that the sum of a paid listing and an organic listing is combined greater than any one equally by itself. So that kind of demystifies the notion that it's cannibalizing each other. So you want to be able to kind of occupy the overall digital shelf space as we look at that. So that's one area as we get into the channel itself. Now, the other big component of the channel that I often always get asked is about forecasting. I invest millions into paid and very little into organic because it's not predictable. I can't forecast it. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where my money's going. That's a very common concern. So I'm just going to run through a really quick scenario that will kind of showcase an equation or a method that allows you to kind of look at how to actually forecast the channel. If you have three different pages A, B, and C, the pages should be matched with individual intents of those pages. Each page will have a series of keywords. In this example, I'm only going to show one keyword volume for one page just to make it easier. So page A has got a keyword that's ranking in first position, and it's 90,500 in search volume. Page B has got a keyword ranking and 200,000 search volume and 10% CTR. Now, every keyword that's ranked on the SERP has got a different CTR rate for its rank position. So rank 1 through rank 10 will have an actual CTR that you can track. We call that our CTR curve. So if you take the keyword and you multiply it, the volume, by the CTR curve, it gives you what the monthly traffic is and then the annual traffic. So in this particular case, with these three examples, we're seeing that the combined volume multiplied by their individual CTR rates gives us about 463,000 in traffic. Now you can take this and you know that what the page is converting at. both if you're running paid to the organic pages, you know that conversion rate, and you know what your app starts or your lead rates or your sales conversions are as well. So in this case, I'm just making up an average industry standard. The traffic times your conversion rate, in this case 3%, equals your leads, which then will translate into sales. So in this case, we said 3% gives us about 14,000 leads. And looking at an average conversion rate on those leads, it's about 556 sales. If your average order value is $550, these 3 pages are going to generate about $305,000 per year. So the channel is very forecastable if you multiply and extract this across the entire landscape, all of your pages, and you can kind of predict what ranking will happen. So if you move from a lower position to a higher position, your traffic's going to increase. Obviously, your sales and revenue will also increase as well. Okay, so the channel does work. It is forecastable. You can create attribution, and you can manage this just like you would any other channel that you're working on. With that being said, let's get into how do we invest into content. Content is one of those things that we've heard for years. Content is king. Content, content, content. Now, that's great, but what content do you need to write? How do you write it? When to write it? And what, more importantly, is expectation and the role of each content. So what I want to do is kind of talk about some common misconceptions first. And the first one being that content automatically ranks. I'm going to write a piece of content, put it in market, and boom, I'm number one in the world. Obviously, we kind of laugh at that. That is not what happens. But because your content doesn't rank does not mean that the content is bad. So one of those things that we have to kind of gauge here, and we'll talk about this, is how to kind of understand that expectation. Secondly, if you have 1 or 2 core pages, and what I mean by a core page, it's 1 or 2 core product pages, and that should suffice. That's enough. I should be number one in the world because I sell widget X, I provide Y service, and everybody should know that I'm the best because I have a page that tells the world I am the best. That's wrong. That is not going to be enough. So then from there, you say, well, okay, the opposite in the scale is I need to become a publisher. I have to publish so much content that all I'm doing is producing content. That's not in our business model either. That's wrong. We're not looking to develop as much content as possible. We're trying to develop a content that matches the journey of the user. Okay. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment here. The last two I'm going to actually bring together: blog content and SEO content. If you ever find a pet peeve of mine, it would be there is SEO content. There is no such thing as SEO content, folks. I am here to tell you that if you publish a piece of content, it should be published for the purpose of a user to read it, and it should be part of matching a step in their journey. Do not write content that is separate. And we always hear, oh, that's blog content. Now, I understand that maybe your internal teams on larger brands and enterprises are broken into maybe your acquisition team or your blog team. That is different. It's a separation. Blog is actually a software within your CMS. It is not a type of content. So we kind of want to kind of look at this and say, do not think that you can put content out into left field and expect that you've kind of met your SEO requirements. SEO is not something you do after the fact. It is a strategic way of fishing, if you will. And I'm going to use that analogy in a moment here. But blog content, SEO content, those are misconceptions. You need to write content that is going to match the user. And the takeaway here is first map your journey. Take your personas, take your audiences, and make sure that you are actually mapping this journey from top funnel to lower bottom funnel. And what I mean by that is know your milestones, know what the users are looking for, and then you can create a full funnel connection with your content. Now, when somebody asks me how much content do I need, I ask them, depends on how far up the funnel you want to go, but as long as you can create enough content to cross the entire journey. And I'll talk about that a little bit more too. The analogy about fishing, I use a lot of analogies, but this seems very applicable. I'm not a fisherman, but if I was, I could foresee myself going out into the middle of the ocean and dropping a line and saying, why did I not catch any fish? Well, because I have no idea where the fish are and I'm fishing in the wrong spot. But what a difference it would make if I actually fished in the right spot. So when you know where the fish are, when you know where the demand is, and you actually fish in the right spot, you're more likely to actually catch something meaningful for you. Okay. So we do that the same thing with content. We don't want to just create content because we think it sounds good. That a few of us sat around a round table and we think that we should create a piece of content about X. Use the science, folks. There is a lot of data science around this. In the example on the left here on the consumer demand, you have a company that may sell auto insurance, and their product is actually called auto insurance. That's the legal and compliance name of their product. But everybody in the world searches for car insurance. So you look at the monthly searches of 3,600 for auto insurance and 110,000 in car insurance. Now, those are two different pods of fish. There's a small pod of 3,600 or a very large pod of 110,000. Now, what you need to do, obviously, is fish where the larger pod is. Now, in that, you're going to have to kind of create the right messaging to be able to appease both of them here. But my point is not about the messaging or making it fit with your legal and compliance team. It's about knowing the data science and fishing where the fish are, know where your consumer demand is, and then map that out. Now, when we look at the funnel on the right-hand side here, from upper funnel to down funnel, we want to make sure that we have an asset or content in market across every part of this funnel. It does one of two things. It solves for a broken journey. So if somebody comes in the middle, they can move up or down funnel because you have all of the answers for them. And it also solves for a brand new point of entry. And the new point of entry, if SEO is done correctly, every single page you have in market becomes your home page or your entry page. So you have to kind of throw out the expectation that people are going to come to your homepage and then click as they move. That is not what happens. People query based on the question of where they're at within their decision journey. And if that asset is matched and you have enough authoritative metrics to it, you will be found, and that's where they're going to come in as a point of entry. Okay. Role of content as an expectation. I think this is really critical. Not all content is equal. When we look at different types of content and the expected ROI of that content, one of the first things that I always address is the role. Set the correct expectations, not only with your internal team, but also your executive team, to know this piece of content that we're creating plays an important role of one of two things. It's either going to match the demand for where the large fish pool is, or it's going to support a theme. Instead of having one or two core pages in market, you want to round out holistically that you have knowledge across the entire theme. So the thematic support of the content, even though it's lower volume, could play an important role. So to identify the role of the content. Secondly, the effort to produce the content. Every brand has a different level set of expectations. It has a different effort to produce. They have different brand teams, content teams, product teams, legal teams, all of these different things. A small business can produce efforts and content much quicker than a large business. So what you want to do is kind of understand the effort to produce the content and weigh that. And what I do typically in the consulting is look at the threshold of the search volume. So if the content is difficult or it's high cost of effort to create, I want to make sure that the benefit is definitely there from an ROI standpoint. So I may not look at things that are under 1,000 in search volume, for example, unless it's critically important to the role of the content of being a supportive element from the overall theme. So you look at the cost of effort to produce that content. The third item that is always overlooked is the cost to rank the content. Now, your content might cost X to produce it, but that's not where that kind of journey ends. To get that content to rank, which I would assume is the only reason you put the content in market, is because you do want it to rank, you do want readers to find it, and you do want that page and that asset to actually have some value. There's a cost to that. And that cost is the promotion and to build the equity and the authority to that in order to get that page to rank. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that expectation in the authority metric, but that is something critical to look at, the cost to rank that. And of course, the last two, traffic to the content and the conversion of that, you want to make sure you're getting the right content or the right audience to those assets. And how does that play the expected role of your overall content as well? Okay. When we look at the role, there's a couple key interest points that I look at from an expectation. You have acquisition content. The intent is down funnel. It's lower in volume usually, not always, but typically lower, and the conversion rate's much higher. It's got a high conversion rate. Where the second type is supporting content. I look at this as kind of like an L2 or a layer 2. It's mid funnel. It's supporting the acquisition content, and it's giving the right final questions that are needed in the decision for the acquisition. The volume is somewhat mid, and the conversion is low to mid as well because it's supporting. The third piece is related content. This is what I would consider more your upper funnel. It's informational. The volume is high and the conversion is low. So why reason I'm bringing this all up and why I feel this is really important is that when you are creating and you're going, whether it's a budget or a finance meeting, or you're trying to get resources to create content and you want to create an upper funnel content piece, and you do it and you create it, it ranks, but people look at it and say, well, there's no conversion on this, let's decommission this. It's not doing any good. It was never supposed to create acquisition. It's never supposed to create conversion. It's a stepping stone into connecting somebody and getting them into the acquisition funnel. So just know the expectations of your content and the role of those so you can correctly articulate those within your business case and within your strategy overall from the SEO standpoint. Fourth piece is a branded piece of content. It's down funnel because the intent is really high. Somebody's looking for a piece, a query that's got maybe a brand modifier on it, and the volume varies. And that the varies because the brand strengths vary. One brand might have a lot more brand recognition than somebody else. Conversion is high, so that expectation is fitting for that branded term. Thought leadership. It's a great piece of content to produce. It's usually informational, higher upper funnel, high volume, again, lower conversion. And lastly, kind of off-page content. It's through earned media. The volume is not always necessarily there. That's not part of the objective. What you're looking for is possibly an earned link. You're possibly looking at getting referral traffic, trending engagement metrics, things of that nature. So those expectations and ROI are vastly different than a piece of on-page content. Okay. Effort to produce content. We'd like to think that you just have an idea, you throw it to the writer, they write it, and a few hours later it comes back. However, I'd like to kind of share a little bit of my process. One, I look at a content strategy. I want to make sure that I understand that keyword research, that landscape, make sure that that journey is completely mapped out. I know what those funnels are. I group the keywords into these proper themes. I develop that full funnel connection that I'm looking for. I make sure that that is reviewed, and I provide a content gap analysis of what assets are in market versus what are missing. The ones that are in market, what needs to be optimized versus kind of remapped or rewritten or refreshed. And then have a complete strategy, put together topics, and then prioritize your articles. And then lastly, creating a content calendar that allows you to execute across those. Once you have that calendar and you're looking at execution, the individual article creation, I always like to pull in existing ranks for an existing article or have a primary keyword target for a net new article. We use a product or a platform called ELPS quite often that will kind of baseline your content scores. And then we create a content brief, and that brief goes to the writers. The writers will create a draft. It goes to the editing team. The editors will edit it. The SEO team will put any type of recommendations based on the anatomy of it and any of the analysis that is required. And then it goes for a final review. And then this ELPS tool that I'm referring to actually does a simulation, and it can actually simulate the content for maximum impact to see what kind of result on the SERP would it have if it actually got published in the current state it was. And then we look at any iterations and make those kind of iterations and cycle as needed. And that then we can produce a piece of content. So it's a little bit more than just writing a piece of content, but what it does do is it's a home run hit every time. We don't have to get up to bat and swing and miss. And as you know, with a lot of brand teams, going and getting a piece of content produced is almost as difficult as any other step within the SEO process or the publishing process that has to do with the brand teams. It can be a heavy lift sometimes. So you don't have a lot of time to kind of guess. We don't like to guess. Do we apply best practice? Sure. But we also like to have some certainty with what we're doing. And it gets a very strategic approach as we look at that. So in our case, this is an effort to produce content, a good model that has worked quite well for us. Benefit of producing content. I'm going to break this into on-page and off-page. The on-page benefits and expectations are it matches that consumer demand. It connects the user journey, and it's a new point of entry. So what we're doing here is you're fishing where the fish are. You're allowing a user to kind of move up funnel or down funnel as they see fit. If those assets are missing, what's going to happen? They're actually going to bounce out of your page, go back to Google, retype in the next query, go into a new website, and if that new website then allows them to connect down funnel to the next page, pretty soon all of the effort that you've done in the origination, the first point of attribution, is now lost to somebody else and they reap the rewards for that. So you really want to look at completing the funnel and make sure your site experience is actually providing primary and secondary CTAs that allow somebody to move up or down funnel as they need to. That's a very critical point here. And then, of course, the new point of entry is if you have that content in market and it meets their needs, they're going to come in to that. Off-page content's different. We talked about this. A little bit that you can possibly get an earned link out of it. You can get engagement metrics, and you can get a referral traffic coming from this. So the expectations of an off-page content is very different than that of its counterpart of the on-page. So knowing those different, you can see that they're not, even though the process might be very similar in creation, the expectations and what you can expect are very, very different. And it's important for you to be able to communicate those differences as we look across that channel. Okay. Cost to rank a piece of content. This is an interesting one that I think that really does get overlooked. You produce a piece of content, it doesn't rank. Well, that's kind of like putting a big billboard on the middle of an island and complaining that nobody saw it. Well, it's very few people that pass by that island to even see that billboard. Same thing here with your piece of content. You put it on your website. If your website doesn't have enough authoritative signals and enough trust signals, Google's not going to rank that into a top position. If you're not in a top 10 position, it's not contributing to traffic and it doesn't have the visibility that you need to do this. So what you need to do is actually understand and calculate the authority gap between your page that you put in market and the actual SERP competition that you're trying to create and get that ranking for. This authority gap is what I refer to as looking into the referring domains. And the referring domains allows you to kind of calculate what that gap is. Now, there's more to authority based on the topical authority that is coming in, the anchor text, the origination, the weightage, and there's a lot of variables to this. But at a macro level, you need to understand what the gap is. And then your gap is going to be some sort of ratio, a 5-to-1, 10-to-1, 20-to-1 ratio, whatever that ratio is. And at that point, you have to know that it's going to cost you maybe 5x, 10x, 20x into the price of originating the content to begin with to actually get the content to rank. And that's going to be a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. You need to build those trust signals and that authority to the piece of content. So just know that as part of the expectation that, if you were to look at the chicken and egg question, what comes first? You definitely need the content in first. You need the relevancy to be set and sound and thematically across the website. But then you need the authority as the catalyst to make that grow and in order to make that rank. Okay. Acquiring the right traffic. Now, if you're not, this goes back to the very beginning of the content strategy and understanding the landscape. If your keywords and the modifiers and the themes that you're picking aren't actually matching the business case and the funnel and the journey that you are looking to do, this is going to be a problem. However, if you've done that exercise correctly, this is going to be a non-issue. What I want to get to know and kind of get across here is the intent. What is the intent? Every page has got a different intent, and it's part of that journey across that complete funnel state as we kind of move through that. So know the page's intent, and that intent is going to give you the right traffic once that ranks. So the traffic is really based on the intent is based on the keywords, and of course then the assets that you put in market are going to match that. This is a big topic. I put a piece of content in and it's not ranking, or they put a piece of content in, it's not converting at the same rate. One of the things that you need to kind of know and understand is not all content actually converts equally. It's not supposed to. When we went back to the roles and expectations of our content, the different types of content, we know that acquisition content is low funnel, it's the bottom funnel. That has a high conversion, but the volume is a little bit lower. So if you move down funnel, a good rule of thumb is you're decreasing your volume, but you're increasing your conversion. As you move up the funnel, you're increasing the volume, but you're decreasing the conversion. So know this, expect this, and your job as you kind of look at the strategic component of this is, how do I bring somebody in the upper funnel where the net is cast wide and be able to connect them to the next stage of that decision journey, into the next, and get them into that bottom funnel. That's when we talk about the site experience and your CRO and converting through your primary and secondary CTAs of doing that. All too often, I've seen very big disconnect. Again, going back to the different types of roles of content, I have seen several brands, they'll put a piece of blog content in the blog, and it's just 1,000 words, type, 10-point font, no visual, and it's just tough to read. It's a tough read. If you did read it, there's no call to action. What am I supposed to do? So if you did do that and you came into that page, you read it, you probably bounce out because you've been satisfied. You read and you came and got what you needed to. The failure at this point was the conversion and the site experience. The failure is to get them into the next stage of that journey. Everybody's going to either be moving up funnel or down funnel, regardless of where they come in. And everybody's going to come in at a different state. So knowing that, you really do have to create this content that allows this type of analogy and this type of expectation that you can kind of know that we're starting at this point. So you're two levels from the top. So you have one way to go up, but you have 10 ways to go down. You need to be able to provide a good connection for the natural progression in their journey, no matter where they're at. And that's done through your site experience and that little CRO type of analysis. Okay. Investing into authority. This is a controversial topic. Authority metrics is something that in the SEO community has been somewhat troublesome, but it can be done properly as you do this. Authority is a key metric. It's nearly 45% of Google's algorithm based on all of the data and analysis that we have conducted and tracked over decades of data. And when we look at that, what Google wants to do is provide the most relevant result that has the highest trust signals and the most authoritative result as quick as possible. So when we look at how do you invest into authority, one, don't ever pay for links. That is not what you're going to do. That's the quickest way to get penalized, quickest way to get demoted and lose your rankings. Stay away from paying for any sort of links. This is a grind, folks. This is not easy to do. Some brands, just kind of look at their brand strength and say, well, I am so and so, I should be there. However, at a page level, most likely you have gaps. So you have to figure out a way to promote and do that. So when we look at investing into authority, the first thing we need to know is that there's two different types of authority. There's a positive authority, and then there's a negative authority. A negative authority is something that is often never even spoke of, but we can't control who links to us. We can't control what website is providing a link to us, either in a positive or a negative fashion. There are malicious tactics that people have used in the past to create link farms and create exploits and to link to somebody to kind of have a negative impact on SEO for another brand. That is negative authority. If you have negative authority signals, it's really kind of like saying, I'm going to run a boat race and I'm going to do that. And I have this high, huge horsepower engine and I know I can win this race, but let me drop the anchor real quick and run the entire race with the anchor dragging on the bottom. Obviously, it's not going to work and be very successful. Negative authority is that anchor for you. It's creating a pull and a draw. When you remove that authority, remove that negative authority, all of a sudden you take off. Now, you didn't create new positive authority. Your positive authority was always there. It was just being covered up by the negative, and the negative was hurting you more. So once you remove the negative, the positive took the traction it's supposed to. So your negative authority is managed through disavow management and a disavow tool. Now, Google says that you don't have to do this anymore. Our algorithm's done this. Don't worry about this. I wish that's true. It's very aspirational. Hopefully someday it'll be like that. I think it is getting better. I think we're closer. But again, you need to look at your link profile. You need to look at the websites that are linking to your website. Is it a good website? There are certain things that just don't make sense. You can't have a domain authority, a DA or DR of 86 and have 0 organic keywords ranking. It's not possible. So when you look at these metrics, and there's counteracting type of key metrics, they're very spammy. So you have to look at the profile, look at who's linking it, you manually review it, and make the determination, is this a good link or is it a bad link? If it's a bad link, disassociate yourself with it. Tell Google, hey, I have nothing to do with this. They're not part of a recommendation. I do not condone this. Please remove this out of our path here. And that's what the disavow tool is for. So your investment into this component is to have somebody either internally or your agency like us or anybody else to monitor your link profile on a weekly basis, monthly, and determine and vet if the domains and the referring domains and the links coming in are actually of good quality or bad quality. The second component, of course, is the positive authority. This is a standard gap that everybody has. If you didn't, you'd be ranked number 1 for every piece of content that you have. So typically content, if your content scores are high and the ELPS tool like that we use shows that you are best in class, great, then usually the gap is authority and you can kind of measure that gap as well. The positive authority is a trust signal telling Google that, hey, there's multiple people linking to my piece of content. So what I'm saying must be true. And that has been like that for years. It's much better now over the years. The algorithm has evolved and they've made a lot of strides to clean this up so it can't be manipulated. Now it's very difficult to kind of gain this positive authority. But your investment should be into creating off-page content, creating promotion, creating a buzz, creating ways that people can find your content on page through off-page efforts. And those end up yielding in a earned link through earned media. And that is really the best way of getting positive authority in a very white hat, brand safe type of manner that Google actually will support and do. They always say create great content and people will come. True, a little bit more. You do need to promote. You need to kind of get out there. You need to talk about it. You need to get those signals coming back in to create that positive buzz for that authority. Okay. One expected, how do I measure? I put money in, we're spending X amount of dollars to manage our authority. We're spending X amount to promote content, to promote the website. How do I know if that investment's working? If you get an earn link, you're going to get positive referral traffic, as I mentioned, and you're also going to see your referring domains elevate. There's going to be a direct correlation with your referring domains in your ranked positions, both your referring domains at a page level and at a domain level. So you're going to want to monitor both. Of course, your page level is going to be a direct for that individual page. And this Simple example is month 1, if you had 337 referring domains, you might be in 45th position. Month 2, you go to 454 referring domains, you're in 19th position, and maybe you hit a threshold. By month 6, you're in 733 referring domains, and you're in 8th position now. So the difference between the 337 and referring domains in month 1 and the 733 in month 6 moved you up from 45th position to 8th position. And it might have taken 6 months to do it. The referring domain tools, I see a question kind of come up real quickly. Ahrefs is a great tool that does that. There's other tools that are out there that can do that. SEMrush is doing a good job with that as well. Our Alps tool does some of that as well. So there are some tools that will kind of look at that. But you want to look at the referring domains and not the backlinks. And the reason I say that is another great analogy is if 2 people are running for a city elected official and we have a ballot box and I have 100,000 votes, but it came from one person. My opponent's got 100,000 votes from 100,000 different people. Which candidate is a better candidate? Clearly the one that's got 100,000 votes from 100,000 different people. That's kind of like what Google's looking at too. If you're getting 10,000 links from one domain, that's not nearly as powerful as 5,000 links from 5,000 different domains. So that's something to kind of look at, is look at your link to domain ratio and try to monitor and control that. But what you're really looking at as a KPI here is your referring domains both at a page level and at a domain level going to increase and track? As it does, the correlation most likely, if your content is relevant and in the right spot there, your rank position is going to elevate accordingly with that newfound authority. Okay. Technical is the last one. Technical is one of those questions that people ask me all the time. How much of technical is part of the algorithm? Based on the data that we tracked for the decades that we've been doing it, we see that technical is about 15% of the algorithm. Now, this is based off of the top 100 results in the SERP over several years of doing that. However, I can say 15% doesn't sound like much, but 15% has got to be 100% correct. What I mean by that is you can't say that my content doesn't render out of the DOM, but that's just one small portion. It's just 15% of the algorithm. It doesn't really matter. Well, if your content's not rendering, then Google can't read it and you're not going to get any ranks. So it's 100% of an error if that content doesn't render out of the DOM. So when you look at how do I invest in technical, I think it's important to understand what are the biggest portions of technical that have the largest impact on your ranks. Page speed is one of those. Now, when we've talked about that page speed, that's the things like the caching and the rendering coming out of the DOM. It's your overall, your first content to paint, the elements that need to come up through that. What you need to also understand is page speed scores have different levels of expectations based on the type of content that you are actually looking at. Informational content has a little bit higher threshold, if you will, than transactional or utilitarian. Transactional and utilitarian, of course, Google's going to want those to be really quick. You're doing something. You can't wait 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds in order for something to create or to render or to kind of complete the transaction. Something needs, like on a calculator, needs to be done in 1 to 2 seconds, versus a blog and informational content could be in that 3-second range and just be fine. So understand your page speed is different based on the type of content it actually is. That's critical to kind of look at. So the other thing about the page speed is it's your core web vitals. It's your overall rendering, how it's caching, your CDNs, your content, third-party attributes, third-party code snippets. Those, if they're placed in the header tag, that can kind of reduce your time speed. Look at lazy loading. There's a lot of different type of things that you can do to kind of increase that. But page speed is one of those key elements. Google will tell you page speed is not a ranking factor, but Google will also tell you page speed is part of a page experience, and page experience is a ranking factor. So indirectly, it's a ranking factor. But you need to make sure that you have kind of get that through and make sure that those elements are going. The second one is hygienic issues. The hygienic issues are your simple 400 errors, 500 errors, missing attributes, duplicate attributes. This is kind of like if you open up the contents page of a book and you look and all of the pages are named the exact same thing, you'd be a little confused, like what is going on? So when we look at that, you want to make sure and clean those up. Those are easy. That's simple. That should be your tech 101, is getting into the hygienic. Now, for whatever reason, it's kind of like a missing sock in a sock drawer, or the socks in the dryer. They just go missing. We don't know where they ever go. Same thing with code. They just break. Things just happen. I have long ago given up on trying to understand what happened or why it happened, just that it did happen and how do we fix it. So audit your code often. I like to make sure that your audits are pre and post at that point. So kind of look at that. And then of course the page templates, the core web vitals, the optimized, all of those types of elements need to be part of your overarching technical bucket, if you will. Okay. How technical elevates. What's interesting here, when you look at the technical, the things that we just looked at, when you do all of those, these are global issues. And the old age citing, high tides raises all boats. That's the same thing here, that inherently your technical will be inherited across all of the global property. So if you make a fix to a template, or you increase the page speed or code base, all of your pages are going to most likely be affected because you updated that template. That's a good thing. It's also a bad thing if it's negative. It's going to affect everything. But on the plus side, when you fix it, you can fix some core issues and it actually impact everything. And when you do make those improvements, all of your pages can increase, and therefore the access and the crawl stats and everything that happens will actually come across a lot quicker. And from there, you can actually create an improvement in rankings as well. Okay. So just kind of look at it, kind of re-categorizing or re-summarizing everything we talked about. A lot of it is just expectation based. The content is a big one, of understanding the role of your content, the expectation of your content, to make sure that you can clearly articulate that with your internal teams, your external teams, your senior leadership, and make sure that everybody's on the same page of the role of that content and the expectation of it. They don't all convert equally. They're not supposed to. And you really need to be able to connect the dots. Don't just put an orphanated piece of content out there. The second piece is the authoritative metrics. Look at negative authority as much as the positive, but you do have to make some positive adjustments to build a positive authority. Your content is not just going to rank automatically. It will inherit some of the authoritative metrics from your domain, so that does happen. But at the same token, most likely at a page level, you're going to have some gaps that you need to fill in there. So you need to create some sort of go-to-market strategy on those content pieces. Don't just promote them. Don't just publish them and put them out there. You need to be able to actually have a go-to-market strategy on each individual content or theme of what to do. And that's going to be a little bit of a journey. And lastly, technical, to kind of summarize the technical, is we're going to look at some key components. Page speed is one of them. Make sure your page speed is in the sufficient range for the type of content. If you have utilitarian or transactional, your page speed is a much tighter threshold. It's got to be a lot quicker than an informational. But even informational, you're still looking at about a 3-second target for informational pages on a page speed. So try to eliminate any technical factors that are there. Optimize your core templates that are running your CMS. Usually most webs properties have 2, 3, maybe 4 different templates that are generating the different types of content. Optimize those templates and you can kind of get a bigger bang for the buck across the whole property. So with that, I'd love to kind of open it up with some questions if anybody's got some questions.
We did get a couple, and thanks for that, Wayne.
Yeah.
One of the things I like is you guys really dig into like the details and show people how to do the calculations and everything. So that's awesome. All right, let's get to it. So Melanie is asking, when calculating authority gap ratio, does domain authority play a role in that calculation?
Yeah, great question. So domain authority, I look as a directional signal. If somebody's got an 86 DA or DR, and you're comparing to somebody who's got a 45, there's a huge gap. However, it's not the calculation, it's not the metric I use to calculate the gap. The gap, you'll see a direct correlation with the DAs to the overall referring domains. So if you looked at how many referring domains that site with an 86 has versus the site with a 45, it might be as large as 15,000 referring domains to the 86 and 1,500 for the 45. So I look at the DA as directional to kind of say, okay, what kind of ballpark am I looking at here? How big of a lift is this going to be? And if it's something that big, I know what I'm up against. And then when you dig into the data, it kind of reveals itself. So no, I don't use the DA. I wouldn't recommend it that. I actually don't even like to report on that on the dashboards because it doesn't change often. Oftentimes it gets updated quarterly. It's not a good metric. It's a third-party tool. It's very directional. So I use it sparingly, but the calculation on the metric is the referring domain, and also look at the backlink to the referring domain. So you have a backlink to domain ratio as well as the overall referring domains to the property or to the page asset.
Great. Alicia asked, does connecting the content include interlinking, or is it only a topical connection?
Nope, it does include internal linking. So I would take your primary terms and be able to interlink those. It also has to do with your primary CTA. If there's an action or call to action button that's going to connect somebody, I would always suggest creating some sort of style guide. Define what your primary and secondary CTAs are, the colors, the size, the fonts, the buttons, all of those, and then supplement that with internal linking as well. Often textual links get missed a little bit from a big call to action, but internal links also help pass link equity or that authority from one page to another. It also helps Google, when the crawlers come in, connect the thematic dots between one theme and another for cross siloing, as well as providing relative content between a primary page and a supporting or related page. So internal linking is good. I would also use primary CTAs as well.
Okay. Question from Austin. Do you use third-party tools for technical audits?
Sure. We do. Screaming Frog's a great technical term. We have our ELPS tool that we use as well. That platform has got some technical audits as well. That is actually kind of a summation, a divergence of multiple tech tools. So it gives us a little bit more relationship. And then that also provides some tech elements as it relates to other elements. So that's why we like the ELPS tool on that one there. But third-party tools, there's some really good ones out there. No reason to kind of reinvent that wheel.
And Terry is asking, does AI-generated content hurt SEO efforts?
Yeah, that's an interesting, tough question. The answer used to always be yes. I don't know the technology. It depends on the technology, the platform that you're referring to. I'm not sure exactly which one you're talking about, but content spinning was always frowned upon, and that was an old term in the old days. Now AI today is very different than content spinning as well. So again, it's really going to kind of determine on how sophisticated the platform is, how they're using AI to kind of interject and create some of those content kind of pieces. I can tell you, make sure it's not robotic. Make sure that there's a good right way of doing it, and make sure the content is actually intent based and it matches the intent of the person or the query that's looking for. So depending on the platform and the AI technology, it's a difficult question to kind of answer there.
Okay. Garrett says, wonderful job, Wayne, super enlightening. The forecasting and ROI was particularly helpful. I'm not sure that there's a question here, but
Just to kind of touch a little bit, one, I appreciate that. Thank you, Garrett. The forecasting, though, is something that does get overlooked quite often. And you can do that at every page level and within the keyword landscape. You can even do that on the gap analysis of the new content that you're looking to produce. So you can build a business case. So if I'm going to create 10 new page assets and the primary hero terms of those all equal to some value of 800,000 new search volume, and it's going to cost me X amount of authority management to rank that and to build that. So my cost is going to be X, but my return is going to be Y. You can actually calculate all of that and you can forecast it. And it's really not that far off. It's looking at your CTR curve. And I would recommend everybody to track their own CTR curves for branded and non-branded terms. You can use the industry average ones, and branded terms are much higher than non-branded terms. But I would encourage everybody to track your primary keywords into a CTR curve through your Search Console. Create your own kind of Excel spreadsheet, dashboard, whatever it is, to track those, so you can kind of help forecast that as you kind of move through that. But the whole channel is absolutely forecastable.
Awesome. Just got a litany of questions, just like they just came right through. But we got like 4 minutes left, but that's okay. We'll make sure you get them all, Wayne. But here was
Great.
a good question by Alexander. He's asking, what are the objections that CMOs give you in that first meeting before the pilot project? So can we give him a little bit of insight on, how to combat that?
Yeah. Typically, most of the objectives is around the channel itself. And the channel is that it's not predictable. I'm going to invest. You're asking me to invest, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars into the channel, and you can't guarantee me any results, because there's nobody that really wants to say, "Oh, I'll guarantee you that traffic," because it is unknown. So you have to kind of build a business case to meet these objections and kind of show that no, it is. You can forecast it. Here is the efforts. Now, there's a lot of moving parts to this, because if the plan doesn't get executed, if the pages don't get created, if legal and compliance changes the intent of the content, it can kind of derail some of the plan. But the plan itself can be created, and you need to kind of look at all of those elements as you do that. But a lot of CMOs don't actually understand the organic to this level. They think that Google's a little bit of a black box. They know that they have to do it, but they don't really want to do it. They don't know how to do it. My advice there is, listen, if there's any CMOs out there, used to be one of them. I can tell you, you can't escape this. If you do not look at the organic channel, your gap is going to be so far behind. It's going to cost you so much money and so much time to kind of close that gap. You are really going to be behind the 8 ball. Even if you can just kind of bite away at it, the old age thing that how do you eat the elephant? It's one bite at a time. That really applies here. You don't have to do all of your lines of businesses at once. You don't have to do every page, every theme. Pick and choose, but have a plan and start working away at it, because it's not going away. It hasn't in the 20 some years that Google's been out and doing this. And you have to kind of get involved in doing that. Just find the right partner, find the right team, and do it the proper way. Don't guess. Don't try to do it, on the cheap. Nothing's going to get done for, pennies on the dollar. You really need to kind of put the right focus into doing it, though.
So Jose is asking, usually how long does it take Google algorithms to process the upgrades that we improve in our pages from content until that development?
Yeah, every site property is actually a little bit different. So a high profiled site with a large brand or enterprise that gets millions of traffic, when they make an update, that crawler kind of comes back quite frequently and will update you quite often. A small business site that gets very minimal traffic, it may take twice. It may not come back for a month or 2 months. So I would say that on a short end scale, from a large enterprise, it could be as little as a couple weeks. And for a small business that really doesn't have a lot of traffic or a lot of profile, not a lot of authority, it could be 2 or 3 months. So
I think we got time for one more. So Aaron asks, when removing content, if it doesn't serve a purpose, does it affect rankings negatively?
yeah, well, yes, it can. So great question about when do you sunset content. One, first question you have to ask yourself, is the content matching a purpose in that funnel? Is there volume behind it? Is it part of the journey? If it is, the content should stay. You don't take content down just because it's not getting traffic. Okay, so that's the first thing. If you're taking it down because it's not ranking or it's not traffic, it's not, it could be the content problem, but that you don't eliminate it from the equation. It's kind of like having stepping stones across a river. Just because the fourth step doesn't get stepped on very often, you take it out, it doesn't make sense, because eventually someday you're going to need that fourth step, and you need to be able to step on that. So you need to look and say, does it have a fit into that? Now, if your answer comes out to be no, we just created the wrong content, there's no search volume, it's not part of the journey, and we need to kind of decommission it. Then you look at the authority metrics that are into there, the referring domains coming in, and make sure and preserve that 301 those to the next page nearest that intent that actually matches that, so you don't lose that equity of that one page that actually had some authority to it.
Great. Well, with that, Wayne, we're at time. So
Okay.
I love all the metaphors. I think that it helps kind of, so like, mentally, it helps you picture, a complex subject that you might not be able to. So I think it's very helpful. So with
Wonderful.
that, we'll give you a big thanks. We'll make sure that we get all of these questions and everything over to you. Before we let you go, tell the people where to find you.
Yeah, iquanti.com. My email is wayne.c@iquanti.com. Feel free to email me. And honestly, put your questions in there. I personally will look at everyone. I do answer everyone myself. So, it may not be overnight that I get back to you, but I will get back to you. So feel free to ask the question. That's what we're here for. I want to lift the industry, help everybody out. So please provide those. I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks. All right, bye-bye.